All right, good morning. Okay, last week we were talking about fellowship. And during our discussions about fellowship and being in church, we did touch on God's order and discipline somewhat as we went along. So this morning, there's a email I'd like to answer that kind of goes along with that. So here's an email someone sent me last week. It says, Pastor Reid, can you please explain why Miriam turned leprous and not Aaron as well? Someone told me it was a gender thing, that Miriam was not exercising submission to men. Okay? All right. So, why Miriam and not Aaron? This is not just a curious question. It's actually, I've had this come up before, because a lot of people assume that because Miriam got hit with leprosy and Aaron did not, that Aaron somehow escaped judgment or was off the hook, right, for the same offense. But this goes right along with what we were talking about in the continuity of covenants and how God deals with his covenant people. If God is just, then why did visible judgment fall only on Miriam and not Aaron as well? Was this God just being hard on women? Was God a misogynist? The event in question takes place in Numbers chapter 12, so go ahead and turn there. But first, before we get into Numbers 12, let's situate the moment where we are at in Israel's history at this time in the Bible, all right? Now, Israel has left Egypt. They've passed through the sea. They've camped at Sinai. They've received the law. They've ordained the priesthood, be the Levitical priesthood, and they've built the tabernacle, all right? Okay, and God is now leading his people through the wilderness, a cloud of by day and by night, pillar of fire by night. Yes, okay, and that was just one chapter earlier. Numbers 11 tells us that there were also 70 elders. They were also received the Spirit to help Moses bear the burden of leadership. Do you remember that? Okay, and those 70 elders received the Spirit. Very important. All right, so in chapter 11 we have this. Numbers 11, verse 26 through 29. But there remained two of the men in the camp. The name of the one was Eldad, the name of the other Medad. And the Spirit rested upon them, and they were of them that were written, but went not out unto the tabernacle, and they prophesied in the camp. And there ran a young man and told Moses, and said, Eldad and Medad do prophesy in the camp. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of Moses, one of his young men, answered and said, My lord Moses, forbid them. And Moses said unto him, Enviest thou for my sake? Would God that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon them. Okay, and this is the movement of the Spirit in the Old Testament, by the way. Very important, very important. All right, so what do we have here? Eldad and Medad prophesied in the camp, and when Joshua got nervous about that, Moses said, I wish all of God's people were prophets, right? In other words, gifts may be shared broadly, but that does not cancel out or nullify the unique office that God gave to Moses as the mouth-to-mouth mediator, okay? So in this atmosphere, we have distributed spiritual gifts, rivalry perhaps, and presumption, right? Do you see what's going on here? Why did Joshua get nervous about that? Because that would undermine Moses' authority as prophet, right? Or as one as God's mouthpiece, right? That's what Joshua was worried about. And yes, that is the same Joshua. Okay, all right. So Joshua got nervous about that. Now, with that in mind, we'll go right into chapter 12. Numbers chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he'd married. For he had married an Ethiopian woman. And they said, Hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. Okay, now what just happened in Numbers chapter 11? Distributed gifts. You see what's going on here? Okay, very important. So the phrase here, Miriam and Aaron spake against Moses. Okay, do you see that? That is a bad translation. It is not translated correctly in the Hebrew grammar. Okay, so we got to straighten that out first. Spake here is the verb va tabder. Okay? That means it is a feminine singular. Feminine singular, agreeing with Miriam's name, not Aaron's. Okay? So stay with me here. Which makes Miriam the subject of that first phrase, okay? So that would instead, what we should have here instead is a third person feminine singular, all right? Hebrew grammar. So it should literally be read, and she spoke. And she spoke, okay? So you could read it as, and Miriam spoke, and Aaron. Okay? Do you see that? That, right there. So, Miriam spoke, and Aaron, against Moses. Okay? That's important because the correct grammar here makes Miriam the active instigator. You see? While Aaron was included as her partner. First things first. And of course, the order of names reinforces this point. Miriam first. And Miriam spoke. All right? And notice Scripture does not hide Aaron's guilt, but it does single out Miriam as the instigator. All right? How many times you read that and didn't know that? Learn something new every day. So what was said? Well, on the surface, it seems to be a complaint about Moses' marriage, right? Now, what about this Ethiopian woman? From our studies, we know Ethiopia is what? What's the ancient name of Ethiopia? The land of Cush, right? So this woman was a Cushite. Very good. As to her actual identity, it has differing schools of thought, though none of them are definitive. So we really don't know who Miriam is speaking of here. Now, some say she's actually Zipporah, right? Zipporah, even though she was from Midian. Very good. So she was a Midianite. Others say she's actually the second wife of Moses. All right? Now, in either case, it's not revealed or debated in these verses because it's not the real issue to begin with. All right? Now, I know that's not going to satisfy you kingdom believers out there and your curiosity. So real quick, I'll anticipate your next question. All right? Pastor Reid, if this woman's identity is of no real import, then what warrants Miriam's complaint in the first place? Right? Was she black? Is that what Miriam had a problem with? Especially considering we understand that she certainly wasn't of another race because that's forbidden. Right? So what's Miriam actually complaining about? All right, so what is Cush? The land of Cush. Here? You see that? Cush was named after Ham's son, Cush, right? Okay, and it's located in northeast Africa, like we know. It's actually the upper Nile, correct? The upper's the lower's the upper. All right. To an Israelite, Cush, now we're up here somewhere, right? And the Israelites, you remember? All right, so to an Israelite, Cush was far south. Okay, and scripturally, Cush means distance, a foreignness, okay? To the ends of the earth, remember? In the southern direction. That's what Cush means. Now, what about Midian? Do we know where Midian is? Midian's over here, right? Do you remember these? All right. So that's on the Arabian Peninsula, correct? And to an Israelite, Midian would have been the eastern wilderness. You see that? All right. In Numbers, it was the local wilderness territory where Zipporah was from, right? So we understand that. So how can it be said that the Cushite woman could have been Zipporah? You see, they say, well, it could have been her. Cush is the African southlands, though, and Midian is all the way over here in the Arabian eastlands. So how are they getting these two women? How are they correlating those? But the two aren't even in the same place geographically, are they? No, but in the ancient world, terms sometimes overlapped or were used broadly. The Bible actually speaks of this. Habakkuk, chapter 3, verse 7. I saw the tents of Cushan, Cush, in affliction, and the curtains of the land of Midian did tremble. Do you see that? How often do you read Habakkuk? Okay. So by Judges 3, the Cushite peoples, rulers, have been dispersed into the lands of Mesopotamia. So it is possible the Cushite is a Midianite. Do you see that? It's possible. So Miriam could have been mocking Zipporah by labeling her a Cushite, right? Highlighting that she's from a distant or foreign land. A distant or foreign land, not that she's of another race, correct? Okay, all right. Or she could have just been poking fun at Zipporah or Moses' wife for being a southerner. Depending on who you talk to, being a southerner is a very good thing or a very bad thing. Okay? Even up here in Idaho. So, or Cushite could have just been Moses' second wife from another region. From another region. Okay, that's all. So Miriam was mocking Moses' wife for either being Zipporah, the Cushite / Midianite, or from the land of Ethiopia, the land of Cush, or it was Moses' wife was a Cushite, another southerner in the camp. You see? So, in the Numbers 12, 1 and 2, the text, we see this, it quickly moves away from that, though. Right? It doesn't take time to discuss who this Ethiopian woman is or where she's from, because as I said earlier, the real issue isn't this woman's hometown. All right? The Ethiopian woman line is just an excuse Miriam used in order to spark criticism to Moses. You see that? No different from ourselves, right? When people want to make fun or undermine someone, they often go over whatever fault they can find or point out right away. Right? They're no different from ourselves. These are our ancestors. It doesn't need to be a real issue, just a pretext. You see, the reference here is a thin cover story. Moses, the lawgiver, would have never have entered into an unlawful marriage. To accuse him of that would be to accuse him of blatant covenant violation, which the Bible never even suggests. Okay? So there are a lot of theories about why Miriam is pointing out or criticizing Moses' wife here. The chief one being, of course, to the unlearned, is that Miriam is speaking out against Moses' black wife, right? And since God slapped her with leprosy for that, God's okay with interracial marriage, right? That's how it's preached. That woman would have never been from another race. Moses did not violate the covenants, all right? And look at verse 2. And they said, hath the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hath he not spoken also by us? And the Lord heard it. You see, here she's challenged God's mediator, Moses' authority. Miriam's problem wasn't his wife, it was his role. You see? The wife she just brought up to start it all. The real issue is rebellion. Because what are they saying here? What's Miriam saying? Why is Moses so special? Aren't we just as spiritual? Doesn't God speak through us too? Right? Now remember what just happened at the end of chapter 11. They have confused shared gifts with equal authority. Do you see that? It's a big problem in the church, is it not? Yes, it is. And their jealousy challenged God's order from within. Do you see this? Psalm 106:16. They envied Moses also in the camp and Aaron, the saint of the Lord. Do you see that? What's the issue then? Jealousy, envy. That's the root of the motive here. On the outside, it seems to be about Moses' marriage. Yet it's really about Miriam and Aaron resenting Moses' unique role. You see? And this pattern is something we've seen before, right? This is timeless. Rebellion often wears the mask of secondary issues. You see? Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 that the failures of Israel in the wilderness were what? Written down as examples for us, right? And Miriam's rebellion is one such warning for ourselves. All right, so let's move on to Numbers 12. Verse 4 through 8, And the Lord spake suddenly unto Moses and unto Aaron and unto Miriam, Come out ye three unto the tabernacle of the congregation. And they three came out. And the Lord came down in the pillar of the cloud and stood in the door of the tabernacle and called Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forth. And he said, Hear now my words. If there be a prophet among you, I, the Lord, will make myself known unto him in a vision, and will speak unto him in a dream. My servant Moses is not so, who is faithful in all mine house. With him will I speak mouth to mouth, even apparently, and not in dark speeches. And the similitude of the Lord shall he behold. Wherefore then were ye not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? That's quite a little chastisement, isn't it? God came all the way down there to tell them these things, okay? Now, God is not singling Miriam out because she's a woman, is he? No, her gifts are real. Miriam's gifts are real. In fact, Exodus 15:20 says she's a prophetess, right? Micah 6 even places her name beside Moses and Aaron's as one of the divinely sent leaders, right? And as a real leader with real gifts, she has real accountability. This is no small thing. According to these verses, to speak against Moses is not just critiquing some man, is it? No, it's resisting the one God himself appointed to be his mouthpiece. The issue here is not gender, but divine order. You see, Miriam led the charge. That's why she bore the visible correction. Okay? Numbers 12:9. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. All right, now we see God's anger here is the Hebrew verb for burned. Right? You hear that? God burns in anger. All right, of course, that would be his consuming holiness, if you read more of the prophets. And notice it's directed at both of the siblings, not just Miriam. All right? Verse 10, and the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, white as snow, and Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. All right, there we have visible punishment that falls upon Miriam. And of course, this white as snow highlights the severity and visibility of the affliction. Okay? This was no case of Miriam just catching a common cold, was it? No, white as snow, it had developed. Okay? Now, why wasn't Aaron struck with leprosy as well? That's the question. Miriam gets turned white as snow, but Aaron, no. Why not? Why is that? Aaron was what? He was, right, we'll get there. Aaron was the high priest. Therefore, if he'd been made leprous, he would have been ceremonially unclean, right? Okay, which means he could not serve in the tabernacle, which would have effectively shut down Israel's sacrificial system. Do you see that? Now, this has just started. The tabernacle was just built. We just got started with corporate worship, right? So, the high priesthood had to remain intact until the ultimate high priest, Christ, came along, right? Striking Aaron leprous would have shut down the high priesthood immediately. We just started. What other high priests do we have? Do we have them all throughout the Israelite tribes yet? We've got the one, right? You see that? Okay. Now there's a parallel to this, believe it or not. In 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12, David commits adultery with Bathsheba, right? And arranges for the murder of her husband, Uriah, right? Now, by the law, both crimes deserve death, correct? Both. 2 Samuel 12:13, and David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said unto David, the Lord also has put away thy sin. Thou shalt not die. Was David let off the hook for this? He deserves the death sentence, right? Murder and adultery. Now, why did David seemingly escape judgment that the law commanded? Why is that? Did God take David's sins lightly? No. The child born to Bathsheba dies. David's household is torn apart by the sword. And these sins scarred David's reign in his kingdom and followed him until the end of his life. Did they not? But David's life was spared. He was preserved. Why? Because of God's covenant with him, right? The messianic promise that through David's line, Christ would come. Therefore, David's line could not be cut off. Do you see that? God's purpose for David required sparing him, even as he severely punished him. Do you see that? So there is a parallel. Just as it was with Aaron, you see, God's judgments are purposeful. They fit into his redemptive plan of the ages. All right? Even though we may, with our mortal minds, not understand those things. But David did not get off, did he? Martha and I have discussed this as well. We believe that this fate is worse than death if he had just died instantly. He saw his entire household ripped apart. But then you've got, well, Pastor Reid, what about those other high priests? They died, right? You're talking about Leviticus 10, right? 1 and 2, and Nadab and Abihu, you know them? The sons of Aaron took either of them his censer and put fire therein and put incense thereon and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Instantly, right then and there. Now, why did they get hit like this, but Aaron still no leprosy, right? What's going on here? Once again, we have to understand where this takes place, okay? At the very beginning of Israel's priestly worship, right? And the tabernacle had just been consecrated, all right? You remember they had put the animals on the altar and then the fire came down from heaven and burned them up, right? Do you remember that? Okay. So now the priesthood has been publicly installed as the mediators between God and Israel, correct? This is the foundation upon which Israel's entire worship life would stand, okay? Now, what exactly did these two do? They offered strange fire. Strange fire. That means the fire did not originate from the altar of burnt offering, which was the only source God had sanctified. You understand? Instead, they brought their own fire into the holy place, their own method of worship. Do you see that? On their own terms. So in effect, they came before God in their own way and modified what he had not commanded. Do you see that? You see, if God had allowed the priests right here at the very beginning to alter his commands on the first day, he would have allowed was a doctrinal act of corruption in the priesthood at its inception. Do you see that? Which would have ruined Israel's covenant worship permanently. Do you see that? All right. Therefore, God's judgment upon these two was swift and preventative. Preventative in order to preserve holiness and set boundaries for the future generations. You see, it all starts here. It all starts here. If they could invent their own offerings and live, then God's holiness would be treated as common, right? And that God's commands were negotiable. You see? And remember, this was all done in public. All done in public. All right? Of course, another parallel to this, can anyone think of anyone else dying instantly? It'd be Uzzah, right? From 2 Samuel 6. He died instantly when he treated the Ark of the Covenant casually, or treated God's holiness casually. They put it on a wagon and it went to fall off and he grabbed it and died right there immediately. Okay? All right. So, New Testament, any witnesses? Ananias and Sapphira? Right, we know them. They were struck dead in Acts 5. Remember that? For sacrilege and deceit directed against the Holy Spirit in the presence of God. Involving what? Money, land, and secretly keeping a share. The irony, of course, being, as Peter told them, they didn't have to. Right? They didn't even have to. They lied about it. And they died instantly. Why? To preserve the church. To preserve the early church. You see, that was right at the early church's inception. God had to lay it down swift. All right? Back to Numbers chapter 12, verse 11 and 12. And Aaron said unto Moses, Alas, my Lord, I beseech thee, lay not the sin upon us wherein we have done foolishly, and wherein we have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed, when he cometh out of his mother's womb. All right. So, apparently, after seeing Miriam white as snow, Aaron is shocked into humility, right? And now, instead of criticizing Moses, he's pleading with him, all right? He calls Moses my Lord. Now, that's the Hebrew word Adon, right? You familiar with that one? All right. And that's used for someone in authority or someone who has a place of honor, all right? And so doing, we now see Aaron acknowledging Moses' God-given authority, okay? And notice the pronouns us. One of the rare times in the Bible it's not shifted, this sin. You see? Even Adam didn't do that. He says us. He does not try to shift the blame to Miriam alone. We have done foolishly. We have sinned. You see? He is repentant. And Moses, he is repentant. And Aaron doesn't say, I didn't mean it. Does he? No, he says, I know what I deserve. Please don't let it remain on me. Right? And look at this. Aaron also knows that Miriam's leprosy isn't just a medical condition, is it? No, she's considered unclean, meaning that she is effectively dead to the community. Right? So it's not just her physical state, but also the separation from God. She can't go to the tabernacle or anything like that. She's separated from God and Israel, the community. All right? And so he also vividly describes what he sees leprosy as. We see here it's a grotesque image of a stillborn baby with a half-wasted body. Right? So to Aaron, leprosy is worse than death. It's a decay of living death. That's what it was, right? And notice what Aaron does not do here. He does not argue with God. He does not protest the fairness of punishment. And he doesn't claim special treatment as a high priest, does he? No, he shows humility before the justice and mercy of God. All right? Now, is Aaron off the hook? It would seem so. No. Well, he's publicly forced to call Moses my Lord as the high priest and plead for mercy. And as the high priest, he publicly confesses sin. You see that? His authority, though preserved, is chastened, though. I think he learned his lesson. After this, we never again see Aaron challenge Moses. Never. All right? As a matter of fact, in Numbers 16, during Korah's rebellion, which is very much like this, correct? Very much like this. By the time we get to Korah's rebellion, Aaron stands with Moses, and he actually wields the incense as the intercessor to stop the plague. You see? Repentant. I think he learned his lesson, did he not? Now, although Aaron was spared of leprosy here, he was not exempt from later judgments tied to his failures, was he? No. We know that he suffered the loss of his two sons, right? Nadab and Abihu. He did not enter the promised land, did he? No. Because both he and Moses disobeyed God by striking the rock. All right? Everybody think it was just Moses that didn't go in. No, Aaron didn't go either. He didn't go either. He died at Mount Hor. He was actually stripped of his priestly garments, and he was replaced by his son, Eleazar. Very good. All right, so no, he was not off the hook. Numbers 12, 13, 14, and 15. And Moses cried unto the Lord, saying, Heal her now, O God, I beseech thee. The shortest prayer Moses ever said, by the way. And the Lord said unto Moses, If her father had spit in her face, she should not be ashamed 7 days. Let her be shut out from the camp 7 days. And after that, let her be received in again. And Miriam was shut out from the camp 7 days, and the people journeyed not till Miriam was brought in again. Okay, so here, once again, Moses, we see him stepping into the role as intercessor. Once again. Of course, there's no retaliation. There's no gloating. He pleads for the guilty, does he not? All right, now, what about this? If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be ashamed 7 days? What is that? The image of spitting in the face in the ancient Near East and the ancient customs was a gesture of public disgrace or rejection, okay? God is saying that even on a human level, such disrespect brings shame and a time for reflection. Do you see that? Even on the human level. How much more, then, when someone is despised, someone of God's appointed order? Do you see? So from least to greatest here. Of course, we know the 7-day exclusion is what? 7-day exclusion, that's the Levitical quarantine law, is it not? Okay. And after a period of uncleanness, an examination would happen by the high priest, correct? And then, of course, restoration could follow after that. You know, those quarantine laws. Yes, very important. Israel's one of the only ones that had them, as a matter of fact, when it comes to those. Now, God's justice involving Miriam is not permanent banishment then, is it? No. It's temporary correction. All right? Temporary correction. The goal was to restore honor, not annihilate the offender. You see? As a matter of fact, according to Hebrews 12, God disciplines his children as a father, not as an enemy. Right? All right, so we see that she was shut out from the camp. This shut out from the camp is official. Okay, this is official. So she was excluded from national Israel's fellowship, right? She was shut out. And of course, this also halted or paused national Israel's progress. You see that? We couldn't move forward because until the offender had been restored. All right, so you see that. So we have a living parable here then with Miriam, do we not? Miriam's isolation embodies what sin always does. It cuts off, separates, and stalls movement. Think about the fellowship we were talking about last week, right? All right. Sin is never private. You see, because one person's sin can stop an entire community. You see that? Of course, in Joshua 7, we have another example of that. Anybody know? Achan, right? You remember Achan? Yes. His hidden sin caused defeat for Israel until it was found and addressed. Again, another witness. So sin, like leprosy here, is more than just contamination. It's disconnection. Do you see? Miriam's rebellion fractured covenant fellowship. All right. God's not singling out Miriam because he's a misogynist. He honored her as both a prophetess and leader, right? And because her leadership was real, so was her accountability. This is not a gender thing at all, but because she led the rebellion, she bore the visible chastisement. Do you see that? God's discipline was proportionate to her role, not her gender. The lesson here is moral, not patriarchal. Okay? And our takeaway from this is holiness is communal. The whole camp paused, right? God was teaching that holiness is not an individual achievement or an individual effort, but a corporate trust. Paul understood these things. 1 Corinthians 12:25 through 27, that there should be no schism in the body, but that the members should have the same care one for another. And whether one member suffer, all the members suffer with it. Or one member be honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now ye are the body of Christ and members in particular. Exactly what we were talking about last week, correct? So, when one member falls, all are affected. The congregation's waiting on Miriam signified solidarity and expectation. Do you see? No one moved forward until the fallen leader was reestablished or restored, right? So we've read this story about Miriam in Numbers 12, and is it just a cautionary tale of sin and rebellion? No. We have a sinner stricken with a defilement she cannot cure, correct? A mediator crying out for mercy on her behalf. A period of separation outside of the camp, outside of the covenant people, and at the appointed time, restoration when she's brought back in. Is all of this just a little story in Numbers? Or is it prophetic? Hebrews 13:12 through 13. Wherefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered without the gate. Let us go forth therefore unto him without the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we have no continuing city, but we seek one to come. Jesus went outside of the city, right? Outside of the camp, bearing the reproach of Israel's sin, not his own. He became the Redeemer who stepped into Israel's exile in order to bring them back. Do you see that? When the high priest rose from the tomb, the entire plan of redemption could move forward. Correct? All right. Miriam's leprosy was not just her own. It was a picture of Israel's prophetic condition. Do you see? Just as the camp could not move forward until the leper was restored, the story of redemption cannot conclude until Israel herself is cleansed and brought back in. That's the promise of prophecy. Hosea 14:4, I will heal their backsliding and I will love them freely. Isaiah 4:4, in that day the Lord will wash away the filth of the daughters of Zion. So you see, what Miriam endured in miniature, Israel endures in history. And what Miriam's restoration prefigures, the restoration of national Israel will fulfill. Do you see that? And that same Christ who bore her reproach outside the gate will soon return to bring her inside, restored, adorned, and reconciled. Jeremiah 3:14, Turn, O backsliding children, saith the Lord, for I am married unto you, and I will take you one of a city and two of a family, and I will bring you to Zion. And when that day comes, the greater Miriam, Israel herself, will stand as the bride, cleansed and received, and the wilderness will at last give way to the kingdom. That's all I have for this morning.